Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, Brian shares his winding path from a non-target school into an accounting role right after the financial crisis. First, he explains how he was able to pivot into RBC for a middle office accounting position. From there, we learn how he was aggressive in trying to get to the front office, the challenges he faced once he got there, and the subsequent jump into private equity at HIG Capital. Listen to hear why, after years of struggling to get to the top of the mountain in finance, he left to go start his own company called LCS, a high-end maker of cool custom laces with NBA and MLB licenses. Check them out at yourlcs.com. Enjoy. All right, Brian, thanks so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me.
Should be great. Yeah, it'd be great if you could just start by giving the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Sure. So I started my career in accounting. My father had guided me towards that. I was sort of just like most of us, younger kid without really any idea of what I wanted to do. Figured business made sense. My dad had pushed me towards accounting. I got my first job in 2009 it started January 2010, but that was like, I was just happy to get a job at that point because it was right after the crisis. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was just get in anywhere, find some sort of public accounting job just so you can get some experience. The money was less important. It was just, get in there. And at that point, I was still living the college life, even though I was post-college. I was living in an apartment with, way too many people, almost treating it like a dorm. Mm-hmm. I jumped quickly from accounting, liked the culture, but didn't really like what I was doing. Didn't hate accounting as a technical function, but didn't really like being an accountant or an auditor or a tax person. So I jumped to another firm, another public accounting firm. So I was at Marks Paneth and Schroen. Then I jumped to J.H. Cohn, and there I liked the culture a lot better. Loved the people, but again, the work just was not doing it for me. I ended up switching from a tax group to an audit group and financial services audit group, and literally did that with the hopes that I can transition that into something in finance. Obviously, in hindsight, it's very easy to see that it worked. But while I was doing that and making that decision, I had no idea that was going to help me. And, obviously that was the reason why I did it, but I was just a young kid and I was like, all right, I hope this works. So I was able to use that 6-month period that I was in a financial services audit group as experience to put on my resume to get a job at RBC within their middle office doing product control. So that was a key step in using my accounting skills to get into the place I wanted to, even though it wasn't the function that I wanted to be doing. Mm-hmm. And I was amped. It was a better job with better hours, better team. And it actually gave me, because the job wasn't super hard, so it actually gave me, or too demanding, it gave me more time to study on my own. During that time, I was trying everything in math and finance just to learn skills to see what I had liked. I remember I started taking, I don't know if you're familiar with Khan Academy, basically mainly for high school and college kids. Yeah. And I learned like 3 levels of calculus in order to become a quant trader. And then I went to take a course at Baruch College that was for literally people who had years and years of math experience. Yeah. And I got in and I just laughed and I was like, I'm not ready for this. Meaning I could do this if I want to pursue it, but I'm going to need a lot more of a background. Yeah. So at that time I was just within the bank. I would reaching out to quant traders, and then I just kept on reaching out to different people, reached out to traders, reached out to, bankers. And I had met so many people, because when you have an email within the bank, a cold email is totally different and holds so much more weight than it does if you're just a random Gmail, just saying like, hey, want to grab a coffee? So I was able to meet, analysts, associates, VPs, directors, managing directors from every level in every part of the bank. Mm-hmm. Response rates were probably 50%. And of those, I would actually convert into a coffee, probably like 75% of those. So I kept a log at an Excel after every meeting, just said how it went from terrible to amazing, and just, what I can take from them. Some people I asked to grill me with questions on what I can get in an interview, and some of those I failed miserably. But doing that, and I had bothered HR quite a bit to be able to try and switch, and I kept on having meetings with HR to the point where they were like, "All right, this guy's pushing real hard." And it got to a point where I think the first time I met with HR, they told me I wasn't ready, and by the end, after about 9 months in RBC, they knew I was ready. I knew I was ready. A spot opened up in campus recruiting, so I jumped in and was able to interview. So I jumped straight into the super day, because the first round they kind of was fit, so they already had known who I was. And I was very ready. I knew I had killed the interviews. And, after that, they told me, like, great job on the interviews. We like when people raise their hand from the middle office, et cetera, to try and to show how motivated they are. And that turned into me joining the leverage finance group in the summer analyst class, in the starting August analyst class for the 2-year program.
Just for everyone listening, that's actually not a very easy transition to make. Actually, you have to be really aggressive, like you were. It sounds like, but
to a point of discomfort. Because I'm not. I've become more of the aggressive type, but I don't like to bother people, and you have to bother a lot of people.
Yes,
and you have to be off-putting at times, because putting myself in their shoes, I would have felt the same way. Like, this guy's a little bit annoying, but if you do it just to the point before it's like too annoying, you're able to maximize it. And I'd love to pat myself on the back, and I can a little bit, and say, hey, you worked hard to get there, but there is a lot of luck involved. I could have done the exact same thing and met one different person, or it'd have been the wrong day for me, or whatever it was, and there goes my chance. So there really is a tremendous amount of luck, but the most important thing is putting yourself in a position to be lucky. So it's just like preparing yourself as much as possible, so that when the opportunity does arise, you can capitalize on it.
You were at RBC for a good run. Then what?
So I was an accountant there for about a year, and then joined banking for about 3 years. Unbelievable experience. Had no life, but really, really learned way more. And also confidence-wise, like, I had come from, I was an average student. I was average at the prior jobs that I had, so I was kind of unsure that how well I would do. And then just after about 6 months plus, I started getting towards the top of my class, and I was interviewing for private equity jobs throughout, and I was just shocked that people are able, after 3 months, to be interviewing and prepared and ready. Some people are, and I know these days most people need to be in order to get those jobs. I was absolutely not ready at all. I couldn't even fake it. I was trying to fake it, but the experience of those interviews really helped in year one. Year two, I was pretty ready, but the things I was fighting against were having, not gone to a target school. I went to Queens College, and that really does affect you. Surprisingly, SAT scores, the people who I was going up against were 1500s, and I was significantly lower than that. So, everything was sort of going against me. And I had a bunch of late rounders in my second year, where I almost got something. And then in my third year, I was sort of like, all right, this sucks. Like, I might not get anything. Do I have to be a banker the rest of my life? Not that there's anything wrong with that. But at that point, I was just so prepared, and I had such good experience, and I was working for, directly for a managing director. Somebody above me got left to go to a PE firm. So it opened up an opportunity for me to take on a lot more responsibility than I could even handle. But because the person above me was willing to take me under their wing, I just learned a lot really quickly. And at that point, I was just going to a ton of interviews, and I was killing a lot of them. And some of them would turn me away for the wrong reasons, but I understand it. And then, HIG, I had a multiple rounds of interviews. I think I interviewed with like 15 people. I had like 4 rounds, a model test, the whole deal. And I actually asked them, they gave me an offer, and asked them after, I'm like, why'd you hire me? And they said, they're like, we were torn because you have a very different background. I was also 2 to 3 years older than most of the people that were coming in, because I'd started in accounting.
Right.
And they said, it's nice to have diversity within the group, and your background is just obviously very different. And, you're clearly a hard worker, et cetera. So I got an offer for a year and a half out. I asked if I could start early. They had said, we can't, because we have another class coming in. And then they came back to me like a week later and said, we're selling a portfolio company. If you want, we could use you to work for us and them. You'll be employed by them, but working for the executive management team, just preparing all the documents, etc. So I was like, of course, that I'd almost prefer that, to be
Yeah.
able to have that experience.
You had done your reps at banking enough. It was year 3. You were like,
Yeah, exactly. But also it's not even just that it was light, because at times it was very intense. It was more, most people go to a PE firm and then they hope to get portfolio experience after that, maybe for a year, just to have the experience. So now
okay.
I knew my private equity job was coming after. I knew this was going to be a year long or less of a commitment.
Hmm.
And I just had the opportunity to actually see the sale process go through from where the sausage is made.
Yeah. Very cool. So you did that for almost a year and then ended up starting at HIG.
Yeah. And
And
I
tell me about
started
that.
at
Tell me
HIG.
about your time at HIG.
So it was an awesome experience. And most people who end up jumping into entrepreneurship do it because they hate their job. They hate working for people. They just can't deal with all the whatever it is. And
Hmm.
for me, it was not the case. I actually wasn't something I necessarily saw myself doing my whole life, but I was just the amount you learn when you first start. And that's probably for 2, 3, 4, 5 years because of how much there is to learn. It just makes it a really enjoyable job, and it's just, you're very challenged. You get paid relatively well, and it's just like a good place to be.
Hmm.
And it was a little bit better than banking because when you're on a deal, it's a nightmare in terms of hours and what you're committing. But when you're not on a deal or it's holiday time, it's extremely loose, and it's not like a FaceTime culture. I don't know if this is HIG relative to other firms, but I found HIG was very, very just to the point, and like, work your butt off and do what you need to do to get the job done, and we
Yeah.
will not babysit you. But while I was there, I was spending a lot of time on my eventual entrepreneurial activities. So I was not performing poorly by any means, but I was sharing an office with a guy who had started with me. He was one of the smartest guys I've ever met, and he was doing really well. And he actually knew everything, obviously, about my business, and eventually told me, he's just like, yeah, I think you're cut out for this. And he ended up investing in the initial family and friends round that we did on the company. But yeah, I was juggling two things. So not only is it hard as an entry private equity associate to try and like get your bearings straight, but there were certain times where I would have to deliver on something and the quality would be a little bit less because I was just on the phone dealing with China and worrying about how our shoelaces came, our company just everything came backwards and messed up. So
To give people just who don't know what your startup is,
exactly, it's
give them
totally
give them a
different.
spiel. Give them a
Yeah, it's
spiel how
totally
you came
different types of
across it.
jobs.
Like
Exactly,
how did
exactly.
you come across like even doing something like this, and then tell people what it is, the name, where they can find it, stuff like that, and we'll recoup
The company.
Yeah, the company.
So the company is called LCS. We are building a brand, a lifestyle brand starting around shoelaces. So the reason why I say lifestyle brand and not just calling us a shoelace company is because it's really brand first, and it's our content first, and everything that we put out there it should be, no matter what product we're selling, that we should be able to leverage our system in order to do that. So it's really the aesthetic of the brand, how we do our photo shoots, how do we edit our marketing and pre and post, et cetera, and just presenting it and sort of building a brand so that people can perceive us in a way in which they want to associate themselves. So we define the company as sort of a platform that's open-ended, but we generally do apparel, and right now it's mainly only shoelaces. But as I was saying before, a lot of time to do development during Corona, so there's a number of other
Things in the
products and
pipeline.
projects that are in the mix that'll hopefully before the end of the year come out. So we sell shoelaces. We saw it as a category. My partner worked at a massive sock company that built a really strong brand based out of Southern California, and he worked there. And I basically just went to visit him while I was at the portfolio company because I was on business in California at the time. I was living in New York. Sort of just shooting the breeze, and it ended up getting into a much more serious conversation. And he's like, I love it here, but I feel like I could do this myself. And he's more of a marketing and networking guy, good relationships with celebrities, athletes, influencers. And I was sort of the finance and business. And then we brought on another partner who was also, he's an accountant, CPA. And the three of us just sort of got together, and we had another partner at the time who we're hoping to bring back on eventually, but just obviously when you're an entrepreneur, you're not really getting paid well. And he had multiple kids who he was like, I'm not ready to jump on this full time.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, so
Understandable.
Yeah, so we started just my father has relationships with China. That's his business, but he doesn't generally do premium apparel products. But he was able to connect us through his sourcing agent there, and it's actually been nice, working with my dad, a different dynamic to our relationship.
Yeah.
And he's great. He's the type of dad who's like, I don't care to make money on this. I just want to like, spend more time with my kid in
Yeah.
a different way. So yeah, we started. Technically, the idea came about in 2016. We self-funded at the beginning. It was about 9 months into the PE job at HIG, where we needed to raise a little bit of a round, and the only way to do that is if one of us was going to go full time. So we got together around. Wasn't so easy, but we were able to raise 300K, and we used that to sort of try and just build a couple of stories to get to the next round. And then so I quit in May of 2018,
Hmm.
and then in July of 2019 we closed our seed round from one investor. We raised $1 million. To be able to just take things to the next level.
Hmm.
Very strong strategic, investor aside from being a financial investor.
Hmm.
And now where we stand is we're still moving, still going forward, but a lot of what we launched since July, it was starting to come out now in like February and March. So things are obviously slow. It's not the best time,
Hmm.
but we're pushing forward and still, moving through it. But like I said, things are slower until this passes, but they're not slower in terms of what's going on behind the scenes and just giving us
Yeah.
an opportunity to regroup and come up with other products or other strategies, et cetera.
Cool. Yeah. So I want to dive in a little more to that story, but let's go all the way back to undergrad. So you said Queens, right? Baruch? Or
Yeah, I went to Queens.
yeah. So you were there. Did you know, you said there was a little bit of kind of, you're a little bit naive, or when you first kind of graduated, you didn't know what to go into and you were just thinking a good job, any job is good. Was accounting always on the radar? Was finance on the radar? Like when did you figure out, okay, now I have this accounting job, I want to pivot and then eventually get to middle office at RBC? Like when did that come on the radar?
Yeah, so growing up, there's the kids in school who are super motivated and those that are not. I was very motivated socially and very motivated, you know, to be spending and maximizing my time, with friends, etc. And a few of my other friends were just significantly. When I say smarter, I don't mean necessarily intellectually smarter. Just were preparing themselves, and those are the ones that got into the good schools. But I just didn't care enough, and it was because I was just an immature kid until right after high school. I went to study abroad. I studied abroad in Israel for about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, it's literally nothing specific besides for just a maturity switch of like, all right, I'm going to eventually have to get serious and figure out what I want to do. And I went through what a lot of people go through, where it's like, I have no idea what I want to do. I don't even know what I'm good at. And how could I know what I want to do without trying something?
Mm-hmm.
So my dad was very much involved in influencing me. My dad, like I said, he works with China and he does sales, so he doesn't do anything within accounting or finance. But he guided me and just said it's a tough economy right now, and the safest jobs are those in accounting, and it's just a really good place to start. And if I wanted to even try and get a finance job at that point, it would not have been, a great one. Because of what the economy was like, and because coming out of Queens College you can get solid jobs, but you're not going to get the top most prestigious jobs. So at that point I was just like, I'm going to go with this because it's what's being recommended to me. It's safe. I did enough research. Hopefully I like it. And if I don't, I'll learn something. And then hopefully along the way, which ended up being true, is you figure out what you like, and the sort of the feelings that you have, whether they're conscious or subconscious, sort of guide you into just trying new things. And, for me, that was probably more extreme than most. I've, pushed myself and battered myself all around within different accounting groups. And, you know, it was a worry of mine that people look at your resume and say, "Oh, you bounced from this group to that group and this firm to that firm." And there is something to be said about that, but it was way more important for me to get my feet wet, in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different things. So I was pushing to accounting for that reason. From day one, I was like, I don't even know how to be a professional, and I don't enjoy, this accounting stuff very much. I just knew right away. I was like, this just isn't going to be a fit. But I was like, learn whatever you can.
Mm-hmm.
So learned whatever I could. Was looking for jobs randomly, probably within 6 months in, and then by the end of the year, I had landed a job at another place where just through a family friend, I ended up getting in touch with the managing partner, and he pitched it really well. Can you imagine a managing partner pitching a super young guy? He wasn't doing it for the firm; he was doing it for me. So
But tell me why even make that jump when it's just another accounting firm?
so at that point, I didn't know if it was accounting. I didn't know it was a specific type of work. I was in the nonprofit audit group. So I
Okay.
was like, okay, maybe these companies just aren't as sexy as I'd like.
Right.
I didn't believe that necessarily to be true, but I was like, just maybe it's the environment. Maybe I need to get out. And I ended up really enjoying the culture a lot more. Um, the social culture just within, I was at JH Cohn, which is now Cohn Resnick, also a mid-sized firm. Just really enjoyed it. Was in the tax group to start. I had good friends, people who were guiding me, and I learned quite a bit. But after about 6 months within there, it was again just like, I don't see myself doing this. So then it was like, I want to get into finance, but I don't know what. And my only way to get into finance right now that I can think of is to switch into an accounting group within the firm. It's an easy step
But
to
why
try and
why
get some.
why were you thinking I want to get into finance? Just because you had heard the trajectory was more rapid, like the pay was better. What were the things like
Yeah, it was.
as a young guy, like, having done a couple of years of accounting at this point, or a year and a half, you were at that second firm and be like, this is still not going to be for me long term. Was it that, or was it just it seemed like a natural thing where you could kind of leverage your accounting background?
It was a little bit of both. It was leveraging my accounting background. It was also just like faster track. You learn supposedly. Again, this was saying supposedly because I didn't know at the time.
Did you have any
You
mentors like guiding you? Anybody there that was like, you should get into banking or try to make it?
not at RBC, but I did have friends who at the time I looked at as just much smarter than me and much more higher achievers and people who I would have dreamed to be in their shoes. Which is nice because I ended up, not being necessarily in their exact shoes, but followed enough in the past to be able to just get that experience. But it was a money thing, just long-term money. It was also like, I don't know if I'll love it, but if I'm going to be miserable, I'd rather be making more money than less money. I
And you were
also
making what,
knew
like 50 to 60K at these law firms as an accountant, something like that?
as an accountant, I started off at I think 54 and
Yeah.
then had gone up to somewhere in the 60s.
Yep. Sounds about right.
And then,
And then
yeah, and
middle
then so
office, you called it like, product control analyst or whatever, doing some sort of accounting for RBC. Was that like a jump up to 70 or or mid 60s plus a small bonus? Something.
yeah, I think it was low 70s.
Yep. Okay. That's
So
a
it
nice
was nice to get
pay
a
rate.
pay bump, and
Yeah.
it was a lifestyle bump, and just like it
And
was
now
a good
you're
move.
at the firm where you can potentially make that next critical jump.
Exactly, and like I told you, when I was like in terms of confidence, I was never an inconfident person, but I just always placed myself and said, "You are here." And there are some people who just achieve way more, and it wasn't even like feeling bad for myself, where it's like, "Oh, I can't achieve what they have." It's just like, just know your role. And
Yeah.
obviously that wasn't good in hindsight. But because I've been able to see what I've been able to achieve, without that. But that was really sort of the mentality, and it was just for a whole bunch of reasons. I also knew that people in banking, if I can get in there, I'm going to be around the smartest people and people who I felt were smarter than me. And it's like, I'm going to learn something. And it's like, even if I don't make it through, it's like, at least I will have gotten that experience. One, have it on the resume, speak to it. So, I was very, very aggressive when I got into my product control role at RBC. So much
How,
so that
how
the
early did
first,
you start like pushing to get to a banking role? Because that could be really touchy, man. What aren't the like the direct people who hired you for for that accounting role at RBC kind of pissed?
so this is what I talk about in terms of luck.
Yeah.
The head of my group was a really, really, really good guy. And he was tough on you to make sure you're working hard and that you're doing a good job. It's the perfect balance. And when you could have in a boss, he like pushes you, also gives you, doesn't pressure you, doesn't micromanage. He's sort of like, do what you need to do, kind of throw you to the fire. And like, I'm here to help if you have questions.
Yeah.
I remember I had my first annual review 3 months in just because of the timing of when I joined. And in that meeting, I just don't know what came over me. I basically said, I was like, I really enjoy this group and I enjoy working here, like, in this capacity, but I am just letting you know that I have been reaching out aggressively to people in the front office to try and get into one of those roles. And the reason why I said that is just because I felt like I really needed to be honest with him, even though it was putting myself at risk. And it ended up working in my favor because he sort of laughed a little bit and he said, "It doesn't happen that often,
Mhm.
but I truly respect your motivation." And he's like, "If it does work out for you, that's great. And it also looks good on us because it shows what these can turn into."
Right.
And if it doesn't, then just like lesson learned. But he was just super supportive about it. And like looking back, it's like I would never tell somebody to do what I did, but the fact that I did it, just like it really, it just, you're able to see that like, yeah, he cares about his group, but he also realizes like I'm a lower employee in his group. Like if I leave, it doesn't change that much, and it's not a disrespect to his group. It was just like I wanted to be able to take on and learn something new and different, and he was just,
Did
there should
he?
be more
Was
bosses
there
and employees like him.
was there any pushback in terms of like, okay, fine, you can do that, but you got to be here for at least a year? Did he say anything around timing? He's like, we can't just hire you and you jump 6 months later. Or, was there anything like?
No, I think he was more like,
Or he didn't think you would actually be
it's
able
not
to?
going to happen. Yeah,
Yeah, it's not going to happen. He's like,
meaning
yeah,
it was like if it does, then like you deserve it. So like
yeah,
if it happens in a month, whatever it is. So that was 3 months in. At that time, I was just so set on like it happening. But around that time is when I remember I was meeting with someone from HR who was very, very tough on me, but in general, just like typical banking, just very, very like we have a very high expectation. And we sat during a meeting and, very intimidating. And I was just like giving her all my reasons and just, she was questioning me and stuff like that. And she just looked at me in the face and she's just like, you're not ready. And I was just like, okay. And like in my mind, I was like, you might be right, but like I want my shot now. But like I didn't say anything. So she gave me some advice. And the next few months I
what was
spent.
that? What was that advice? Was it like go back and learn financial modeling? Like what was she telling you to do?
Yeah, it was you need to learn, the technical stuff, and you need to be just as good, if not better, than anybody else who's going to be in your position.
Yep.
And two, like, you have to realize that this is not just something that every day people do. And even if you are potentially qualified, you can't just keep demanding it and forcing it to happen because it's just, it's just not that easy.
Yeah.
So she had just said, like, also in my confidence, the way I was saying things, it was all this stuff was new to me. So when I was answering her questions, there was just, it's, I don't lie very well. So you kind of like see that it's just like I'm sort of faking a little bit until I make it, which is all I can do at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
How are
then
you prepping for these like HR meetings? Would you suggest people like prep for it as if it's like an actual investment banking interview? Was she like, obviously she was asking you like the, well, why? And like, what do you think that's going to do? And why do you think you should be all those kind of more behavioral side, but were there any like technical questions about like financial modeling? Was she doing that?
yeah, but nothing like very deep. It was just like high level things, just like walk me generally through these types of models, which if you're going into investment banking interview and you don't know by heart, like, then you
Yeah.
should
You're right.
reconsider.
Yeah.
I remember, I think after, so it was 3 months and then 2 months later, probably 5 months in, I got an opportunity to interview actually, and I didn't get it. It was not for an analyst class. It was for for a FIG investment banking group. Someone had quit and they needed the help. And so they gave me an opportunity. Very tough guy, very tough interview. But he was asking me some like relatively basic looking back questions on present value, not like what is present value, but just simple stuff that like I should have and had to know. And I was like aggressive in the interview too, but like to a point where like I made sure to like, chill and not overstep my boundaries. But he basically told me before it was even over, without even relating to HR, he's just like, you're not ready for this. You need to understand these concepts. So I got lucky that I actually was shut down a couple of times, but
Mm.
because of the way I did it, I was able to get another opportunity. And then I think it was another 3 months or 4 months. So finally 9 months in is
Did
when
you think
everything
after that
happened.
second time where you kind of were shut down, did you think it's not going to happen, or did you doubt yourself, or you were just confident that like, if I keep pushing, I'm going to get there?
There's no, yeah, I had a ton of doubt. Like there was self-doubt, like,
It
but
doesn't sound like it by the way you were talking with them.
yes, but it was almost like I don't have anything to lose, so try until the point whether you feel like you're really overstepping and people are getting annoyed with you, or that you just like actually have technical failure, or you just get thrown. I told myself, I was like, this is so important to you. You don't want to get fired, but if you do get fired for these reasons, you're not going to regret it.
And do you
So
feel like you had enough of like, you were good enough with like reading people that you would know kind of when you started crossing that line?
yes, but it's not just a very clear line. There's a lot of gray. So once you start entering into the gray, which I think I did, it's you don't know. And there's also different people who have different thresholds for what they're willing to take.
Yeah.
So I never overstepped. I was called out on overstepping in a way that was almost in a good way. I remember, this is actually interesting. You'll probably get a laugh from this.
Mm-hmm.
Once I got the offer to join the investment banking class, it was, I think it was June, and the class was starting in August. So HR had like, I went to speak with HR and I told them, I was like, is it okay if I take 2 months off to travel before I enter into this? And the words that she used was literally an HR woman. She's just like, you have some balls. And I basically said, I was like, listen, I understand if I can't, if I'm not granted that, it's not me demanding it, it's me asking. And if not, I'm more than happy to stay to do what I need to do. But just like I'm entering into a time where I'm not going to be able to do this, and it just gives me an opportunity. And she said, she's like, it's very reasonable. She said, let me just confirm with some people. She got back to me like an hour later, and I booked a trip like 5 days later to go
No
to
way. For 2 months?
Thailand and Japan. I went for just for like 3 weeks
That's
because I
amazing.
wanted to like prepare. But yeah, I went by myself. I had met up with some acquaintances there. But yeah, that was awesome. Also, just getting the opportunity to have like free and clear mind. Don't worry about a job and just travel, aimlessly.
And so how much time did you actually get off for that?
Um,
Like, I know you did a 3-week trip, but was it like a full 2 months before you like
it
even?
was it was no, it was like 6 weeks. So it was like the middle of
That's so
June
amazing.
until
That
yeah, it was
that's
great.
so unheard of, man.
Yeah, I traveled. Of course, yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, I traveled for about half of it, and then I was just sort of home figuring out, moving apartments, finding, just taking care of all things I needed to do. But
Very
yeah, it
cool.
was it was an awesome opportunity.
So you finally make it. Tell me what the feeling was like when they finally like you were entering into that interview process and you're kind of getting through it. You're probably more prepared. You're doing well. Did you think like I got this time? I'm going to get it, or what was the thought process like when they called you up? Were you jumping off the wall, or what was it like?
Yeah, so as I was saying before about interview experience, like even if you're not going to get a job, in PE when you're in banking or whatever it is, it's just take the interview.
Yeah.
And there were some interviews, especially at the beginning, where I was just like, I would just smile in the middle and basically be like, without saying it, like, I know I'm not getting this and I know I'm failing this miserably. And they kind of understood that. And they were like, good work, just work on these 2 things and like come back.
Hmm.
So that was sort of the same thing with everything. The first time I tried, I was not as confident, but I grew more and more confident. So
Hmm.
I spoke with HR the first time and they rejected me. Then I got an interview and then they rejected me. And I was just like, all right, if I can keep on getting opportunities, I'll be prepared.
Hmm.
And a meeting with all of the bankers, all the way up from analyst to MD, they basically gave me every resource. I actually have a Dropbox with a lot of stuff in it. Not necessarily everything, but basically I can just, a lot of people have reached out to me because they see Queens College and investment banking and they're just like, all
Hmm.
right, this already seems like a unique route. So I share this Dropbox with them and it just has a lot of the resources that I use to get smart. And I was able to ask people questions about things that I couldn't understand. So I had the resources you know, at my discretion. So I was able to leverage it. So once they called me up and said, you have an interview tomorrow, for a super day. And I was like, oh my God, like I can't screw this up. But I was also like, dude, like you're ready, like you're ready to take this next step and just do it. And so I'm not gonna lie, I went in and I was very scared, but I knew what the construct of the interview was going to be. They also told you a little bit about it, what it was, and I was able to speak to other analysts to get an idea of what it was. So I over prepared in a way that I did perfectly fine. So I had 3 interviews, MD, VP, or MD, and 2 VPs, and I crushed all of them, and I knew I crushed all of them. But I just was hoping that was enough. So it wasn't like I walked out confident, like you're getting it.
Yeah.
The MD, I sent a thank you note after, and he responded to me and like said, "Great work." And at that point, I was like, "All right, that's a really good sign." Usually, they don't respond, and to respond and say that, not that I knew, but I was just like, "Okay." And then I think it was a day later where they called me up, and I was just like, "Holy cow!" Yeah, the feeling is great because if you set your mind out to do something, you doubt yourself the whole time,
Yeah.
and then you get it. And it's funny because there's some of my friends who like went to really good schools, they just get these jobs easily. So it's just like, oh my God, what it means to me. And now it's funny looking back on that, it's like the levels of confidence that I've surpassed because of all the things that I've had to put myself through. I'm obsessed with continuing to achieve and getting to the next level. And so once I got into private equity, I was already at the point where I was like, all right, now I got to start my own company and do
Yeah.
it my own way. So it's very obvious trends, within me to see myself continuing to achieve, and setting goals. And once you break those goals and reach those goals, you set onto others. And
You
you know,
mentioned a lot about like networking internally and how that was really successful. You had like a 50% hit rate in terms of people actually taking your call, and then a 75% conversion from there to actually getting a coffee chat, which is insane. Um, did you have any similar success outside of RBC, or or are you just 100% focused on just staying within the firm?
um, the success outside no, I wasn't. I was willing to take anything, but I just knew I had an advantage. It is absolutely night and day having an email handle within the bank
Hmm.
versus reaching out from any other email address. I have the same conversion rate that everybody else does. There's no magic. There are a lot of advice you can give, and all of that advice gives you like a marginal 0.1% chance improvement of getting somebody to answer you. Like no one will. People get too many emails.
What do you think
Not
the hit
saying
rate? What do you think the hit rate is on like cold LinkedIn and then cold emails?
it would not shock me that that if you reach out to 100 people, you would get maybe 5 responses. Some people might get more, and let's say you do get more,
I'd
they're
say the
also going to
connection.
be.
I'd say the connection rate is closer to 20 if you structure it well in terms of like an actual connection. Like you say, "Hey, I noticed you have this." Da 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 da.
Oh yeah, if you have a connection, it's a little bit different rather
Like,
than what
oh,
I was doing.
you went to my school, or you're
Right.
from my city, something like that. I think it can be
Yes.
closer to 20 to
So yeah,
30.
I have LinkedIn. Like I've just been the guy who's tried to maximize connections, just because once you have a connection, even if you don't know the person, it's like, oh, they're connected, so they have some sort of. So I have like 2,000 connections on LinkedIn. I know probably 10% of those people, but
Yeah.
people have asked me for intros. I've asked people for intros, and it's helpful. But I'm talking more about at the time I was using LinkedIn, but I was also using like just company emails, because a lot of people, especially the senior people at banks or people at banks, don't provide their email because they don't want to be bothered. So
Hmm.
you have to find the email, the format of how the emails are done.
Hmm.
And for every person, try 3 different formats, whether it's first letter of first name and then last name, or the whole name or dot. And you try a bunch of formats. You do it with all the people you see. You send it out, and some people might respond. A
Yeah, we
lot of
actually
those.
have email formats in the company database for
Oh
listeners.
yeah.
Yeah, so for every company, if you go in there, it'll say first dot last at whatever, right? Goldman
Oh,
Sachs.
so that's extremely helpful, because then
Yeah,
you're getting through to people. It's just a
yeah,
matter of like, okay, then they're not, they're just not answering me. But
yeah.
yeah, when you're outside and you're just randomly emailing somebody, I didn't get responses very often, and if I did, most of them were like, yeah, we'll meet for coffee, or like let's connect later on, or like, it's just
Blowing you
it's
off.
very.
Whatever.
Yeah, and I particularly feel a little bit more of an obligation to answer those emails when I get them, just to pay it forward.
Yeah,
But even then, if too many people reach out to you, it becomes a
yeah,
distraction from your day. So I can understand it a lot more now,
yeah,
than I did at the time. But it's just like people just don't have the time to answer every email.
yeah. So okay, so you're having a lot of success within the firm anyways. So you're kind of doubling down there. You're meeting a ton of bankers, and you're kind of getting resources. You're getting kind of prepped. At what point do you feel like you're ready? Like you said, you had a whole spreadsheet kind of tracking how the conversations went. What do you feel like you obviously got better as you did more of these like networking chats with people? Do you have any advice for the listeners for who are like, let's say in the middle or back office and they're trying to do these types of coffee chats, which may be a little awkward, where like the banker probably knows, okay, this kid wants like, eventually transition. How do you make it a success or like a ranked at 10 on your scale or however you did it? What was that?
So number one is arming yourself with information. So whatever extent you possibly can, whether it's Google searches or just even having access to Wall Street Oasis, like there's just so many things that you can utilize, and learning the skills over time, just understanding at a very high level what the models are, what an analyst needs to know on his first interview. But most importantly, with that, you're not looking to meet up with somebody and show them how much you know. That's usually a common mistake, and people will throw out words to like think that they have common ground. It's like, I can say DCF and I know what it is at a high level. So now this analyst, even if he's 6 months in and doesn't have a lot, like that guy is not going to be impressed by hearing you say DCF. He's like, so you need to be armed with that information so that when they are giving you advice or telling you what to learn or telling you how it's specifically used, you know how to use it. But when you're meeting people at analyst level, you show them a little bit more respect than you might anybody else, but also treat them as your friend, where it's like you're just shooting the breeze and don't be too formal. Whereas as you go up the chain, have a little personality, but just respect as you move up. So like I said, I was aggressive, and at times it worked and at times it didn't. But there would be some people who would tell me a piece of advice and give me criticism, and I might not take it well or not well. I would just argue against it, and I'd say, what about this? And it would just be like, that's not what this is about. Like, I'm here to help you, and if you want it, you can take it, and if not, not.
Hmm.
But yeah, you sort of develop your own strategy, and just don't try too hard to impress people.
Hmm.
Just try your hardest to show a genuine interest and know and have a number of answers as to why you want to do that.
I love that. Yeah, I think trying so hard to impress people and show that you know the right lingo, I think, is a huge mistake. People trying to
Huge
sound
mistake. Yeah.
too smart. I think you can show your intellect and show that you've done the research based on the questions you ask if they're nuanced enough, so that you can do that. But it shouldn't be some BS, type of question where
Right.
there's no reason why you'd be interested in that. Like you can't really like feign like, oh yeah, I'm curious about, where pricing is on high yield, whatever.
Exactly. And if you ask that, it ends up doing you a disservice, and it almost would be better off if you didn't even meet with them, because, and there's also going in with the expectation of knowing that a lot of people either won't be nice or just are going to tell you that you have no and be negative, or just be like, you don't want to do this. Trust me. Like, you don't experience it. And you have to be able to face that. So like my spreadsheet didn't say like, oh yeah, all these things were good. Some of them were like, this guy hated me. Like,
Yeah.
try and avoid him and make sure he's not involved with you getting a job, because I just had a bad feeling about that meeting. And it was like, don't reach out to him again. That's the reason why I kept a log, is like to keep track of who I reached out to,
Mhm.
when I reached out to them, how I felt the meeting went, just the temperature of the meeting.
So how many people did you meet with, you think, overall, with internally before you made the transition?
It was meet with, I would say maybe 40 to 50, but reached out to is probably like 200.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And yeah, and some of those
I
meetings,
love
like I
it.
said, like didn't go that well, but like I was just like, I don't know if this is gonna work, and that's the hardest part, because you're dedicating so much of your time to making it work. But I was just like, the only risk is it not working. Like, there's no other risk. Like, it's just when there's
Yeah. The bigger
you
risk
learn in
is
finance.
telling HR over and over again.
Exactly, but worst case, even like, obviously I did not want to get fired, especially at a young age, because that hits your confidence. But like, I knew I wasn't going to get fired. I figured I would have a talking to first, where it's like, you need to know your role and like stay where you are and like work hard. And
Yeah.
I didn't even get to that point, so I just knew I had that. And and everything in finance that you learn now is just asymmetric upside, and that's what it was. Like, the downside was most likely low probability of me being fired, and the impact of me being fired wasn't even that bad when you're that young in your career. You
Yeah.
feel like it is, but
More likely the downside would be just like a stern talking to, like, you need to stop this. Like you're getting,
exactly. And then at that point, okay, I need to behave myself.
yeah. So, okay. So tell me a little bit about that first kind of week or in training. You're kind of a little bit older than the other analysts. Were people looking at you like, how did this kid get in here? Or what was it? Whereas everyone very super friendly? Tell me.
Well, I didn't stick out in terms of the way I look. I
Yeah.
wasn't. I
You're
didn't
still
have
young.
didn't
You
have
have
a
a great
beard.
beard, gray beard
Yeah,
like this.
yeah, exactly. I didn't have obviously any facial hair. That was an absolute no-no. This is actually a post-finance, like,
I
rebellious beard
assumed. I
that
assumed
I've
it
hung
was
on
a
to for
it was an
quite a while.
entrepreneurial beard.
Exactly, exactly. So people didn't know, but I would sort of, in networking with people and just connecting, and be like, "Oh, where'd you go to school?" And then people would be like, "Oh, interesting." But I didn't really get a lot of disrespect. There probably were a bunch of people who were like, all right, this guy won't necessarily help me as much, because I want to leverage with the other guys and see what they're doing. But didn't feel like there was that much judgment. I mean, I felt like I had to like
Prove
be
you.
a certain way, yeah, prove myself because of that. And it was, true to an extent. But most importantly, I told you this was like a common issue for me when I was just doing it, was, again, no confidence issues, but confidence in terms of, now I feel like I've just entered a territory of people who are just a step caliber higher than I am. And I therefore need to give it all in order to just do the same as they're doing in half the time, or whatever it is.
And was that true? I mean, did you feel like technically you were able to ramp up? I mean, training's not that much time to really get ramped, but did you feel like all the prep you had done for the interviews at least was helpful somewhat, or no?
It was. I definitely felt like I wasn't as prepared as some of the other guys. I felt like they knew some finance concepts, where, to me, like, I literally took finance 101 in college. I had accounting and economics background, so I had to do some stuff, but like, I knew like what present value was before I started studying for these interviews. And then I obviously learned a lot from the interviews, but I still was just like, I felt behind.
Yeah.
And again, I wasn't sure, is that like because of my intellect, or is that just because of lack of skill? And it's
Mhm.
normal to have a lack of confidence, in that scenario. But what I did learn was that, I would say, for the first 6 months, I was probably on the lower end of my class in terms of performance, just because it was a lot. It was something I had never dealt with before. I didn't go to a high commanding university either. It was relatively easy.
The hours must have been brutal, and the stress must have been really high at those first 6 months.
Yeah, it was stress, and it was also like, I don't know if I can meet this deadline because I don't know how to do the work, and there's only so many questions I could ask and how much spoon feeding I can get.
Yeah.
So a couple of people spoke to me within my first 6 months and were like, the other analysts are outperforming you and this and that. And it scared me, but I like to hear that. I like to be aware. And the next 6 months, I picked up the pace a little bit to where I was still lower performance, ended up getting, there was 5 buckets of bonuses. I got the second to lowest and like sort of wasn't upset with that because I was just like, I'm happy that that means I can continue,
Do you mind sharing? So like your base is what, like 80 or 90 or something? And then you're
my salary in my first year was right before they changed up. I don't know if they've changed it since, but they like shifted more to salary from bonus.
got it.
So I think my salary might have been, in the 70 range, and
Yeah.
then bonus was somewhere around, I would say 90 to 100% of that.
Okay. So even in the second lowest bucket, it was that?
Yeah, I would take that with a grain of salt because I was obsessed with that at the time, but I just don't really remember, which is crazy how long it's been. But it was in the low 100s all in,
Okay.
even with my relatively lower bonus. Now I think bases are a little bit higher and bonuses a little bit smaller.
Yep.
So I'd gotten the second to lowest bucket. They didn't tell me that, but obviously it's very easy to figure out once you go and talk to the other analysts. And then the next year, the first 6 months, I felt that I was performing, as average.
Mm-hmm.
And the last 6 months is when one of the analysts, he was an analyst that should have been a VP. He was an absolute all-star, was able to learn under him. He had patience, he was just a really good guy. And like, yeah, he'd make fun of you, but like, he was very good and like allowed you almost to work underneath him. And like, I grabbed every opportunity. And then he quit and went to HIG in Miami, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to work directly for the MD that he was working. And I was like, I am not ready for this, but I'm not going to get another opportunity like this. And it was amazing. Like the MD that I worked for was a very tough guy, but he also, like, if you did stuff wrong, even if it was stuff that he knew that you shouldn't necessarily know yet, he's like, if you want the responsibility of acting like an associate or VP on a deal, he didn't even have to say this. It was just like, then you got to be able to perform. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to bring someone over you. And he didn't say that again, but I felt it. And I just worked even harder. My hours during that year were crazy. The market was a little bit lighter in that year. So the first year analysts were actually not getting a great experience, but I was still working those crazy hours because I was going through commitment papers and loan documents to be able to be like, I need to put together a summary on this. And I don't even know what half the things mean. So it's just like, I was able to leverage our lawyers and, to be able to have them explain it to me. And the nice ones were, would explain it to me in detail. And it's just having that experience is what really, pushed me up. So by the end of my second year, I knew that I was towards the top of the class. And when we had my bonus conversation, I was given middle bucket. And I basically said, again, my aggressive side was like, thank you, I appreciate it. But I felt that I was a little bit of a higher performer. And they basically said, at the second half of the year you were, but the first half of the year you weren't. And I was like, you're going to pay me based on that? There's something that is fair about that, but it's also like something that's really annoying about that.
Yeah.
And then in my third year, I knew that I was towards the top of my class. I mean, granted, a lot of people had already left at that point.
Yeah.
But I was performing just, to the same level as I felt the top performers were, better than some. So that was a huge achievement to feel for me, because then it was like my confidence just got even higher. And then it's like, I can do what I want now. And that's when I remember in my second year, somebody had left to start their own company. And I was like, are you crazy? Like you're on a trajectory to make such good money and you're just walking away to start your own thing. And like, it just doesn't make sense to me. That just speaks to how risk averse I was and the way I was brought up to just be like, you have to, if you find something, work hard and just be a hard worker. And then it's just funny how looking back now, I was not only that guy, I didn't take a salary for my first year. But yeah, I basically made it till just at the end of my third year. And I was offered the associate offer, and I accepted it because I thought I was going to stay until HIG to the following year. And I didn't tell anybody internally that I got an offer besides for the people that I had set up to give a, in banking, they don't care about your employees knowing, and it's good because the cultures usually accept that. But I had to give them 3 or 4 names of people who they can get recommendations from and referrals, and they asked them for referrals. So everyone that I'm knowing anyway. But I signed it, and then literally a few days later, I ended up taking it back because HIG came to me and said, "We have this opportunity to work at portfolio companies." So they were annoyed at that. They're like, "You just accepted, at least, to be an associate. We thought you were going to be here long term." And it's just like, and I didn't feel bad, at all. I was just like,
You had
all of a
accepted
sudden now that,
you had already done a 30-year analyst. They were giving you the associate promote if you stayed for like another year, kind of thing.
well, it was associate promote, like now you're a full-time employee. It was no longer like a 1-year contract. It was like the expectation was you're with us forever. And so I signed that, and so they were like, "Okay, now we have like a good core, whatever." And then leaving, it's just we were a relatively small group, so there was only like
A couple associates or whatever.
yeah, like what was more? There was like 6 or 7, but like 3 of us were coming in from the analyst class, and a lot of the associates that come in from MBA. I know the MBAs are not going to be happy to hear this, but you will never catch up. As an MBA associate, you will not catch up to any decent analyst who started 3 years before me and before you, and it makes sense. Like they know the group, they know how things work, and yes, you have a different skill that you bring, but it doesn't matter enough in the context of where you are now. And it was very frustrating. I guess this is a message to some people who come in as an MBA associate. There were certain people who knew it, and they were like, "Dude, like I'm here to work under you, like teach me,
Yeah.
And there's other people who were just like trying to push authority because like I'm above you. And I was like, that's not going to bother me. It's going to annoy me, but it's just going to play poorly for you because I'm going to end up either pushing the work on you and you're going to get in trouble because you're not going to have it the way it's supposed to be, or you're going to lean on me and I'm going to sort of,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, in terms of like them trying to like assert even though they were associates, they felt superior because they had the MBA. You feel like,
yeah. And the fact that they were an associate, they were just like, all right, I know like you're not happy about me coming in above you, but I was fine. Like, I don't mind. I don't care about a title or whatever it is. It's just like, you need to understand that if you're going to want to run this, you're not going to do as good a job as forget anyone who's been here for 2 to 3 years because we just know the system better than you.
Yeah. And you've been working crazy hours, 80+ hour weeks for
yeah.
2
And
years. So you're
exactly. And in the longer run, it might benefit you, that fact that you got the MBA. So in 3 years, you might then be ahead of me because you had 3 years less of experience, but you had what you needed. And now you have this MBA plus, other different experiences. So you might, but in the meantime, like there's no way.
No, I think that's a well-known thing is the post-MBA associates coming to banking, especially if they didn't do banking pre-MBA. It's usually a really tough role for people because especially when they have to go work with experienced analysts, if they don't like bow down to them, it can be very ugly.
Yeah. Another piece of advice I would give to someone in that position or in just coming in as an analyst is people will be on you the second you do anything that is not up to their highest demand. So you are going to be criticized, but most of the time you need to realize that there is a lot more leeway in terms of you losing your job, that you shouldn't just get discouraged and say like, all right, it's been 2 weeks and I've been yelled at for every single deliverable I've given.
As an analyst, you mean coming in?
Yeah, analyst, or even if you're a brand new associate, and that might happen. But yeah, this is for both equally. There's a lot more leeway. They actually prefer not to fire you because it looks bad.
Yeah.
And if you're horrible, they usually, unless you're so bad, they need to get rid of you right away. But if you're like even just bad and not great, they're going to probably hold you until your 2 years is up and then just not give you a 30-year offer.
Right.
So that should just give most people, like, once you're in the door, just take advantage. And as long as you work hard, you will not get respect, but you will not be removed for most likely from your position, and you'll be able to get the time you need to advance.
No, I agree with that. I mean, I think if I look back at my analyst class at Rothschild, there was 12 of us. And I think, people knew who was working hard and who wasn't. And it became pretty obvious who was actually working on live deals and who was stuck on these like middling pitches with no hope of going anywhere. But yeah, man, the learning curve was brutal for me. I came out of liberal arts college, so it was like I knew nothing coming out of training, nothing.
Yeah,
I had no internship or anything.
It's shocking. Like when you get in there, you're like, how do they have this expectation? But then you realize, to the point I was saying before, is like they expect you, but they also give you the leeway to be able to make it. So it's just like, just try your hardest and definitely try not to piss people off.
Mhm.
and like, don't be so aggressive. And for the most part, when it came to that, I was very quiet, did not like, there were a few times where I might've been out of line, just like I feel like most people were, but you just take it, whatever it's coming from. It makes you better, even if it's done in the wrong way. It's just like, and it doesn't matter what their intentions are. It just matters that, there were some people that I worked with that I didn't really like as people,
Mhm.
but they were just so good at what they did, and learning under them
Oh,
just changed my career. It really did.
so awesome. So, okay. So you're kind of coming into that third year, you get the associate offer, you sign it, then you kind of renege on it because you get the HIG offer to leave early. And you're like, hey, I'd rather than continue to do reps in investment banking, let me go get this new kind of interesting experience trying to sell this company for HIG. So you do that for a year. Tell me, what was the transition like there? And then specifically once you actually started in private equity.
So the transition was great because like it was casual attire. I was in most of the personalities, or at least I was in an office in the company was based out of Winnipeg in Canada,
Okay.
but they had been bought out by when they were bought out by HIG. They removed the management team that was in Winnipeg, and they hired people within the New York, New Jersey area, well, actually all in New Jersey. So they had a small office in Montclair, New Jersey. So thankfully I did not have to move to Winnipeg.
Yeah, you would have
Um, no offense to Winnipeg,
any
but
Canadians in Winnipeg
yeah, I
here.
had gone there twice. It's a cool place to visit, but like, yeah, I would not have want to live there coming out of New York City
Yeah.
for a year long or 10 months long. But the CFO and the CEO were both like type A, but they were also like just very culturally different. When they're like older and they've been doing these jobs for a long time, there's just like, oh, we talk about our families and we talk about our friends, and like it's just like the CFO is like really chill. She would like just ask me about my personal life, and also just like tell me like, sit down, like let's just talk for 2 hours, and like
Mm-hmm.
ask me what you want. And she was just a good mentor.
That's awesome.
She was very, very sharp as a boss, sharp in terms of intellect, but also sharp in terms of like, especially when things were under pressure. It's like, I need this done now, and I need it done right.
Mm-hmm.
And if she doesn't believe you can do it, she'll give up on you, which didn't really happen besides for at the very beginning, but had me working with other people. It was surprising to see that just in an ice company based out of Winnipeg, that at least at the high level, there was
That
like,
intent.
it's driven by management teams that have worked for private equity in the past. And it's just very different because it's like they're answering to a boss, and it's like, it's not only me running the company and answering to the board. It's the board is a private equity team that I need to do right by them, because I'm going to be one of the first things that they consider removing in order to make things better if I'm not performing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was stressful environment as the process got a little bit more intense, when it was just like a lot of diligence questions and how you handle it and this and that. But it was really, really, and just got so lucky to have an amazing experience, because I was able to be so much part of the process. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be part of the negotiation as much as I'd like to,
Yeah.
because I was not a member of the company who was staying on after, so they did not expose me at all to. They ended up selling to Blackstone. I was not able to really talk with them, and purposefully not talk with them at all or negotiate with them at all. I had some contact with the banking analysts on our sell side for HIG, but like I was definitely left out of that. They also didn't really want me to go to like the debt investor meetings because of that. But in terms of the roadshow
You didn't
for.
want people to like pick your brain about the financials or something like that. Like,
Exactly. And just like, it was like, you're not part of the company going forward. So like, we don't want anybody, it's unlikely that anybody would know or care, but we just, want to make sure that we're keeping an extra precaution.
got it.
But I did get the opportunity to go to a bunch of the management, presentations, where you're able to sit across management and basically just grill them. And, I mean, obviously different way, just, but just digging into things. And those meetings helped me significantly for HIG, because a lot of analysts are scared to ask questions because they're afraid they're going to be stupid when you're in a meeting with your, VP, principal, and MD. And there were certain times, again, where I almost asked the most questions in those meetings, because I had the experience during the management presentations. I didn't talk much during the management presentations, but I was just able to observe how things worked, and I so consistently. Sometimes things were uptight, sometimes things were very loose. It was just an awesome opportunity. Board meetings, everything like that. It was my first exposure to it, and I had more exposure to what was going on under the hood than a PE analyst who's just seeing what's going on in the meeting. So interestingly, when the relationships between the company and, as in any relationship, the company and the PE firm, I was able to see both sides of it, to see who's talking about who's saying what, who's annoyed at what. And seeing that is obviously a social business concept, meaning you're able to learn the things that aren't just technical, and you're learning how people work and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So it was interesting from, multiple different angles.
Yeah, to see if
But
CFO being pissed that they're pushing her to do whatever, and
yeah, and like, who's right? Whose side makes sense? Are they both right? This is just a matter of a frustrating time, and
right.
you're able to analyze.
Can you give an example, like a quick example of that, like something around like the financials of how it's being presented, something like that?
Yeah, it's also disagreeing on the way. Yeah, not even necessarily presented, but something could come up about the way things are being accounted for, and like I was hearing both sides of the argument. It was a very technical accounting argument.
Hmm.
And it was just like, oh, it was displayed, we're being shown this way. Like, in order to go back and present it in the way that you want it, because we're not, we have to back into things, and it would be a rough figure. Or it would be like, timeline needs to be updated. It's like, well, I need a week to do this. And it's like, well, we need you to do it in 2 days. And it's like, great, there goes my next 2 nights or 3 nights. And that's fine for an analyst in an investment bank. But when you're the CFO and you want to get home to your family, it's like, this is terrible,
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a lot of stuff like that. And like I said, the CFO and the CEO were, type A, just like the PE fund people, most of them are. And it was good, but it was also like butting heads. But you're just able to see like little discrepancies. You're also able to hear, when you're on one side of things, you'll be like, oh, I can't believe they did that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you hear the other side, and like, I can't believe that. And you hear people's arguments.
Hmm.
So interestingly, in entrepreneurship, but probably in general, is the thing that you don't realize, even though people say this, but you don't realize how much more important the people element is than the actual technical knowledge and experience.
Yep.
At the junior level, it's a lot less important, but in everything you do, especially PE, but then 10 times more than that, entrepreneurship, it's like your skills almost don't matter until the company is already functioning. Like right now, I built a great financial model for our first raise. But
Yeah.
like, as I was doing it, I was cracking up. I was like, assumptions in like all these models are completely estimated as it is.
Hmm.
Now I have something that doesn't exist yet, and I'm trying to pretend what it's going to be. And
Hmm.
I built a really great model, but like, in my mind, I was like, if anybody challenges this, it's like, they're of course right, because
Yeah.
I know nothing, and it's just it's so subjective.
So let's pivot to that, because you were only at HIG for a little time, for a little bit, and then you started chatting with your buddies and said, "Hey, I got to go create this laces company."
Yeah. So
So
the
like,
company basically.
why did you feel it was? You had mentioned somebody had seen this, like, oh, we could do this ourselves. Like, why not? There's high
Yeah. So
margin.
my current partner
Mhm.
was working, I said, at a big sock company that built a really strong brand around their socks, and they took off and doing great right now. And he's still working for them as a consultant, but he's moved on to something else, and he works with us sort of part time. Like I said, he's more of like the connections and like general marketing and stuff like that.
Yep.
And he's just very involved in that world. It's sort of like a streetwear type brand, but it's not honed into only people who wear streetwear. It's a family oriented business as well. So I was on a trip with again, they wanted me to see, the management team gave me an opportunity. This wasn't even the PE team, it was the management team, to see all the different production facilities. And you think packaged ice, that's what the company did. It's called Arctic Glacier. They sold packaged ice.
Hmm.
You'd think like it's frozen water, like how hard can it be? And so their best plants were in California. So I went on a business trip for a week into Sacramento, and then we drove all the way down to multiple different plants from there down to Oceanside, which is south of LA,
Hmm.
near to San Diego, actually. So we did sort of like a California road trip. Really cool guy, older guy, chill guy, and he was a manufacturing specialist. So he was basically, I was latching onto his trip because he was doing manufacturing business, but I wasn't there with really any takeaways besides for like just try and learn what you can.
Hmm.
And it was awesome. And I actually learned that I believe right now that the appropriate and best role for me would be an operations role with a finance mixed into it, in terms of what I'm passionate about.
Hmm.
That's what I enjoy most in terms of, my company now is developing the new products from scratch. Obviously, I don't have the background, the engineering background or anything, but leveraging others and just sort of being obsessed with the process really, helps you learn a lot. So while I was there, I was just asking what every single thing was, understanding like literally how ammonia is put through the pipes and how it gets hotter and colder and how they make so many pounds of ice in a day and how they deliver it in the freezer trucks, and just like it was just learning the economics and really understanding the business. And I've always been the type to feel if I don't know a lot about something, I'm going to fall behind. But I actually criticize people in finance because they only need to know a certain amount in order to play the game well. But it's just like you don't know what you're talking about, and the management team or the engineers know better, and you need to take the advice from them and have it translated into financials more than just, and again, I'm speaking out of two sides of my mouth because the finance game is one that is obviously proven to work, and
Yep.
there are engineering experts within there as well, and there are operating consultants and stuff like that. But most people just are satisfied with knowing what they need to know in order to get a deal done. And I just have an intense thirst for knowledge. One, because I want to know, because I like knowing, but also because I feel like I need to be, like when it comes to laces, again, you'd think a lace is simple. Like there's just every part of it is just complex in order to try and make a premium product. So anyway, so the company started, the idea came in 2016. I was on business in California and was visiting my friend in Oceanside. And it was just supposed to be a shooting the breeze type of lunch. And we ended up just talking a lot more seriously. And it turned into, starting this company. It was starting a company. We didn't know what we wanted to do.
Hmm.
We'd come up with like unbreakable shoelaces, which existed, but we came across a material. Won't get into too much of the detail.
Yeah.
I left his office that day and set up a WhatsApp chat with him and the two other friends because it was like half a joke at that point, if not more.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we got to start this now. Like, let's just talk. So we got on the phone like once a week. We were talking in the WhatsApp chat. Most of that was like just fun and us again shooting the
Ideas.
breeze and just
Yeah.
making fun of each other, like and then I ended up like pushing and working with my dad to try and get samples. And our first sample of the laces we ended up releasing in February. We incorporated in January 2017.
Hmm.
Our first laces in February of 2017, and they were crap, man. I mean, it was awesome to see like a first new product, but they were crap. So yeah, the decision to start this was I have an opportunity now where I feel like I have a good understanding of business at a high level. And I'm also like, I feel like I have enough of a sponge in me to be able to learn what I need to learn. Like most entrepreneurs that start businesses are not geniuses. A lot comes with it. And it's just really working hard and trying hard. And this partner was sort of a marketing guy and he had a lot of connections. So I was like, let's start based on that. And it was very slow, especially when none of us were full time. And then we're like, we need to raise more money. With that money, we were able to get licenses for the MLB and the NBA. That helped a little bit. We had a
I don't know about that. Isn't that tough to get those licenses?
So
This
it
guy,
ordinarily is.
this
It
guy.
ordinarily is, but this guy, yeah, he was the head of licensed sports
Yeah.
where he was, so he had those relationships on tap.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we were able to get them, and then we didn't want to be a sports laces brand. We wanted to be like a lifestyle brand, but we wanted to have that sports as a component, and that sort of helped us. We had one of his connections help us. We gave, we set up a partnership and engaged with him to help us get into some stadiums and just a lot of learnings. You get into the stadiums and you're put on a wall in the back or you're put on a rack with playing cards, and like we have a really nice packaging, and it's just like we did a big run, and it's just like there were no sales in certain places. And then like Yankee Stadium, for instance, there was just like no sales. They sold like 12 in 3 months.
Yeah.
And then we put a nice rack in the front of the store. Like we used our connection to help us get better placement within their main store at Yankee Stadium, and put it on a fixture that we bought to like test out. And then we sold like 150 pair in a few games.
Yeah.
And everything ebbs and flows, and it's really a hard product to market. We knew this going in. There's a lot. It's just hard to get people to change their shoelaces over their socks or whatever it is. But our target consumer was the sneakerhead community, and our content has really, really gotten good.
Hmm.
And our product has gotten really, really good. I know it's just a shoelace, but like I'm proud of how far we've come in terms of printing and weaves and the packaging. It's come a really long way. And so, like I said, Corona right now is definitely putting a little bit of a damper on things, but everyone's going through that. But overall, it's just it's nothing that being an entrepreneur, and I'm not saying that, like, I call myself a wantrepreneur, because until you have that first success,
No,
you're a wannabe
quit
until
your
you
job.
are. But yeah, I'm living the life. I took no salary for a year, and now once we raised our seed round, I'm making a salary that's probably, at max 20% of what I feel like I could be making. And it's just like, that's tough, and it takes a toll on you. And some days are just like, we have no chance, and some days you're just like, this is definitely going to work. And it's just, we just got to keep moving through it and keep pushing through it, and that's what we've been doing. And
So what's next for you guys? I mean, besides this run, and once we get to the other side of Corona or whatever, do you feel like it's just like it's all distribution game, right? At that point, and once you have the market.
well, it's still marketing, and more importantly, branding. And branding is something that's defined very differently by people, but we do our marketing in order to build our brand. Brand is something that I've struggled with, because I believe that most people don't understand what a brand is, including myself, and how a brand functions. And my partners challenged me on that. I was trying to come up with something simple at the beginning, just like, put this out there, and like, as long as it's a clean aesthetic, but it goes so much more beyond that. And I'm going to quote Marty Neumeyer, who's a famous designer. He's worked for Apple and stuff like that. He has his own agency. He basically said, it's the brand is what's in customers' heads. So you're what you say about your brand is not really what your brand is. What you're doing when you're branding is you're trying to build the perceptions in other people's heads to what you want them to be. So that is a really, really complex thing, because then you're dealing with people's emotions and what drives them to make purchasing decisions,
Right.
especially on things that aren't necessary and things that just are supposed to just provide them happiness,
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a big part of where I spend my time. And it's funny, because you think you're going to take your finance skills, build a model, and do the accounting, and it's great. And like, it absolutely helps me the way I think, because now I think more of a business, rather than someone who just has a design skill might not be able to translate it into how a business should function. So
Right.
it's extremely helpful and necessary. But majority of my time is not spent on modeling, or
Right.
ROIs
Yeah.
or financials. It's all, how do we market? How do we connect with people? How do we get people to buy it? So I think and I'm a pretty constructive person, and obviously I'm biased. I think that the place that we're at, not necessarily in terms of our growth in numbers, putting that aside, just because everything has been ebbing and flowing, and random times it will be better, and random times it will be worse. I think that it's just, we're in a very creative mindset, where we hired a new creative in October who is outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
He's been extremely helpful, and we fight in a really good way, all of us. Like, we trust each other, and we get on each other's throats, but in the end of the day, we are able to put our egos aside, and it really is developing into, at times it's bad, but a lot of times developing into like a good culture of just trying to like put all our heads together to make a better company, a better brand, a better product, and better everything.
Sounds like a blast. I mean, you're doing it with some friends, so that's like a dream. So for a lot of people.
It's funny that you say that, because it is a nightmare also.
Yes.
The stress that comes along with it, and I know this is almost cliche to say, because there's so many books about it, but like, I am going through the same things as the people who made the biggest startups in the world. But the chances of me being able to get to what they got to are so small, just because of how statistics work.
Yeah.
So when you're in this, it's so much harder. And then in 20 years, and I'm a billionaire entrepreneur, I'm able to write a book, then it'll be easy to look back and say, oh, it was stressful, this and that. But while you're going through it, it's like, it might be for nothing. And not only for nothing, the opportunity cost of
Yeah.
not building wealth, it really takes a toll on you.
Mm-hmm.
And also feeling helpless in times when you just feel like you don't have the right skills to be able to help in an area that you need, and not knowing where to find the right people, or being able to hire talent because you don't have the cash to be able to pay them the salary that they do. Like, these things are really, really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And having to be obligated, or feeling the obligation of having investors invest in you, and being responsible for what they invested, and knowing, especially at an early stage, you can give them back nothing. It's just a very, very hard thing. And it took me a really long time to be able to find some stability, and just accepting the extremes and trying to find a place in the middle.
Yeah. No, I think I feel it too. I think I came at it a little bit differently. We, not having a physical product, we never really raised any money, but it was still stressful once I made the leap.
Yeah, I'm sure I can relate. I'll tell you that.
But yeah, listen, anything else you want to share with the younger listeners before we call it? Do you know any advice or advice to your younger self?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm in a place where I think in 10 years I'll have hopefully more advice to give. I'm not yet successful to the extent that other people might not see it, but I had the success that I needed to be. And everybody's different, but I think most importantly is understand how risk reward works and use it to make decisions, but don't let let other people influence you, but don't let them influence you in a way where they're going to make the decision for you.
Mhm.
You need to use other people to develop an understanding of how your world will work to the extent you could possibly know it. And the risk reward of me jumping out of a private equity job when I worked my ass off to get it and start a new company, most of my friends were just like, I'm actually willing to invest in you because you're that crazy. The risk
Yeah.
reward doesn't make sense. But to me, the risk reward was my life. I don't want to look back and regret it. So if I end up failing, which I might fail once, I might fail twice, but I believe in the end those things will help me succeed. And I still believe that even on my worst days.
Mhm.
I think it's really just about understanding that the risk reward for me was it's such a big risk to not do this because I will always live with the regret of not doing it. So looking at it a financial risk reward is kind of silly. And I also built up enough of a background where there's so many things that I can do within finance or startups and everything like that. Like the skills that I've learned from an entrepreneur is one, the emotional side of it, but two, just having to just think of everything on your own and being fully responsible. And so I would just tell people to just really think for yourself and assess your world in the way that you want to and whatever makes you happy, but also look down the line to make sure that you're going to keep yourself consistently happy, you know, over time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for taking the time to share your wisdom with everybody here.
Yeah, it's not much wisdom yet, but yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick at wallstreetoasis.com. And until next time.